It's Lara here with your weekly Witchy Wednesday astrology video. And this one is for the week of October 16th to 22nd, 2019. So thanks for being here. I appreciate your interactions and your engagement and, like shares and all the rest of it. And I hope that you stick around and continue to join me here. So at first glance, it looks like there's not a whole lot happening in the skies this week. And in fact, I've heard a few astrologers say that. And so I thought, what am I going to talk about? And then when I started looking more closely at the chart, and I was listening to some recording the other day, not related to the weekly astrology, but it sort of sparked a thought. And I thought, this is what I'm going to talk about because this is really relevant right now. So we're just coming off this full moon in Aries, right? So we're still riding that wave. And I spoke all about that in last week's video. If you didn't hear that, you might want to go back and have a listen. And I called that video Fortune Favors the Brave, implying that we are being called to sort of take on the role of the brave warrior, to take some brave action in some area of life, right? Well, then I'm looking at the chart and I see that Mars, ruler of Aries, is currently in Libra and approaching an exact square to the nodes, to the nodal axis. This is actually happening on Monday officially, but with any astrological event, we feel it on either side, right? It's not just that one moment in time. So we're building to this energy, and it is related to this Aries full moon. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video largely. We're going to talk about Mars, and we're going to talk about Mars squaring the nodal axis and what that means for us collectively and individually, right? I'll go through each sign and speak to this. And essentially, where Mars is sitting is where we are being called to take this, brave action, to assert ourselves, to ultimately make a choice. And that choice has to do with where the nodes are currently at, which are in Capricorn and Cancer. And so wherever those sit for us, this is kind of what's kind of hanging in the balance, Libra, if you will. All right. And so, this full moon in Aries, like we may still be trying to figure out, what is this? What action am I being called to take? What's the next step, sort of? And I spoke to you last week about having this kind of sense, that everything's hanging in the balance. We're still in Libra season. The sun is still in Libra until later on in the month, right? And Mars is there. So this is what we're going to talk about today. And before we get into all those details, I'll give you the scoop on where the moon is at. The moon is currently in Taurus as I'm recording this, and it's moving into, so Taurus is that fixed earth energy. It's moving into the mutable air energy of Gemini this evening. So, lots of thinking, talking, socializing, these kinds of things. And then we'll move into the the cardinal water energy of Cancer on Saturday. And then it will move into Leo on Monday, right? Leo's that fixed fire energy. And on Monday, this is when we have the exact square between Mars in Libra and South Node in Capricorn and North Node in Cancer, all at 11 degrees of the cardinal signs. So the cardinal signs will really be feeling this a lot, particularly if you have sun, moon, rising, a cluster of planets, your nodes around 11 degrees of Libra, but of the cardinal signs, you know, but that's always give or take several degrees on either side of that. But we are all experiencing this on some level, right? We are certainly seeing this play out on a collective scale where we are being called to perhaps be the brave warriors, where, you know, Mars, the god of war, is being challenged to act with justice and diplomacy, Libra, to make a decision, you know, this kind of thing. And what's hanging in the balance are the nodes, right? The North Node in Cancer, what we're being called towards, this notion of the divine feminine, of nurturing, of emotional security, of home, and our roots and our ancestry, and our place of living, and the past in some ways, like our ancestral connection to the past is what I mean by that. And then South Node in Capricorn, right? The structures, the authorities, the institutions and establishments, the patriarchy, you know, this is kind of like those old ways are ultimately not working for us anymore. And so we're being called to take this more Cancerian approach to move towards the North Node in Cancer, right? So that's on a global scale. And then, of course, for each of us individually, we've got Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn in our chart somewhere, sitting in specific houses, right? For each of us. So a little bit more about Mars. Just as I spoke about in a few weeks ago, I think it was, you know, Venus had the her conjunction with the sun. So she, you know, held council kind of thing with the sun, or the sun held council with Venus. And at that time, she was invisible. And then she emerged, right? And is moving farther and farther away, gaining independence from the sun. And she is seen in the evening, right? Becoming more and more visible as the evening star. And Venus is that feminine principle of attraction, of getting what we want. Mars and Venus are both about getting what we want. But Venus is the most, or Venus is the feminine energy, the yin way of doing that, right? The yin approach of being receptive, of drawing in what we desire and what we want, you know, what we're attracted to, kind of thing. And then Mars is the more masculine principle of asserting ourselves, of taking action, of going out and getting what we want, right? Staking our claim, kind of thing. And so the more yang principle of getting what we want. And so just as Venus met up with the sun, Mars did the same thing in early September. So Mars had a conjunction with the sun in the sign of Virgo in early September. This marked the beginning of a new Mars cycle. What does that mean? Well, Mars takes roughly 2 years to circle the zodiac, right? And every time Mars conjuncts the sun, it's the beginning of a new Mars cycle. So it's kind of like where, you know, Mars meets up with the sun and says, okay, where am I going to focus my energy over these next couple of years, right? What's this going to be about? This sort of masculine principle of getting what I want. What is this going to be about? What is this next couple of years? You know, what's the focus going to be? So as Mars starts to move, move out of Virgo and is moving into Libra, it is moving further and further away from the sun. So whatever seeds were planted there are starting to become more, we're becoming more aware of them, right? The momentum is building. Mars is starting to, just as Venus is kind of gaining her independence from the sun, Mars is doing the same. And so we're becoming more aware of, okay, what is this Mars cycle going to be about for us? And we're at a point where when Mars is squaring the nodes, we need to take some kind of action or assert ourselves or make a decision, right? About what's the next step. So hopefully that all makes sense to you. Mars is the energy of, Mars rules Aries, right? And before Pluto was discovered, Mars also ruled Scorpio. So Aries and Scorpio have that in common. So it's this powerful kind of warrior energy. And it's kind of like, I think of I think of Joan of Arc when I think of this energy, right? This spiritual warrior kind of thing. And it's kind of like Mars is like how we are instinctually driven to get our needs met, and sometimes our wants as well, right? Our desires. And the shadow side of that energy can be anger, war, rage, just going out and taking what we want without regard for others. Me. It's about my needs are most important kind of thing. But at the same time, on the other side, on the flip side, it's important to get our needs met. It's important to assert ourselves, right? And so we have to strike a balance here. With Mars in Libra, the other thing I want to say about this is we need to get off the fence now, right? We need to make a choice, Libra. It's about choosing. Libra doesn't necessarily love to have to choose because it doesn't want to rock the boat. But on a deeper level, Libra is about, sometimes you need to rock the boat to regain equilibrium. To make things more fair and more just and that kind of thing. So ultimately, Mars and Libra square the nodes, right? Is about taking some kind of action, asserting ourselves, starting something new. It's cardinal energy, right? This energy of newness, of new beginnings, of initiation. And kind of having to make a choice. South node, north node. Are we going to carry on doing things the way we've always done them? Are we going to revert back to old patterns, behaviors, ideas, ways of being, this kind of thing, South node? Or are we going to forge a new path ahead, right? That's that Mars energy, that Aries full moon energy, moving towards the north node and what our soul is drawn to, right? It's like uncharted territory in many ways for many of us. So this is what's happening. And what I'm going to speak to as I go through each sign is the choice, what hangs in the balance kind of thing. So this is where the north and south nodes are sitting, that axis that the north and south node are currently sitting for you, for each of us. And then where Mars in Libra is, this is the arena that we are kind of like asserting ourselves in, that we need to take this brave action, right? So hopefully that makes sense to you. And I'm going to do this based on, as usual, in a general forecast. Rising sign, right, is first and foremost, most obvious, most accurate. If you don't know your rising sign, there's plenty of places online you can drop a free birth chart. You just need to know your birth details for that, including your birth time. And if you've had a reading with me or another astrologer, you will know that information. And you can use that, right, to listen to these general forecasts. And if you don't know that, then by all means, and even if you do know, listen to your sun sign. It will give you an added layer of information, and also your moon sign as well. So it gives you more kind of complete picture of how things are playing out for you. So I think I did say, but I'm not sure because I've done a few takes of this video and I don't remember if I said it in this take or not, but the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, will really be, no doubt, kind of feeling this tension of this Mars squaring the nodes. Particularly if you have things around the 11 degree Libra mark or 11 degrees of the other cardinal signs, right? But again, all of us in some way experiencing this. So we're going to begin with Libra because Mars is sitting in your first house. But we're going to start here with what's the choice? What lies in the balance, right? That's where the North and South Node is sitting. So for you, the South Node is in your fourth house. South Node in Capricorn is in the fourth house. And the North Node in Cancer in the 10th house, right? So the choice has something to do with your private life, your home, your family, your place of living, your foundations, your ancestry, right? Your roots, that's South Node in Cancer in the fourth, and your public life, your career, your ambitions, the legacy you wish to leave, your relationship to authority, notoriety in some way, this kind of thing. This can have to do with like the authoritarian figures in your life, often associated with, the father figures, whereas the Cancer in the fourth house, more the nurturing sort of female mothering figures, right? So ultimately, there's a choice here that's being asked of you. And Mars in your first house is saying that action, that assertion, you're being called to take, has to do with your self, first house, your relationship to yourself, your physical vitality, your physical appearance, physical health, who you present yourself as out in the world, how people perceive you, your instinctual kind of trajectory, right, through this life. So that's kind of the fulcrum, right? And so this can have to do with, remember, North Node in the 10th house for you. So perhaps changing careers, to improve your health and vitality. Changing careers will mean that you are seen as somebody different than you used to be seen as, right? Out in the world. This can be about asking yourself, what is the legacy I wish to leave? And, 10th house, North Node. What can I do to embody that? First house, right? What actions can I take, Mars in Libra in the first, to embody that? So hopefully that makes sense for you, Libra. There's lots of ways this can play out, but if you think about where the houses, right, those life themes, then you'll have a good idea of what this means for you. Moving on to Scorpio now. Scorpio, you have Mars in the 12th, and then your nodes, the nodal axis, so the transiting nodes are in the 3rd and the 9th for you. So the South Node in Capricorn is in the 3rd house, and the North Node in Cancer in the ninth house for you. So the choice has something to do with this third ninth house axis, right? Communications, travel, teaching and learning, expanding your horizons. That's very ninth house. Your philosophy and belief system, ninth house. Your immediate environment, third house. Siblings, neighbors, peers, cousins, third house. This is the axis of communications of the higher mind and the lower mind, so to speak, right? Our thoughts and philosophies versus our actual, communications on the day to day. So North Node in the ninth suggesting that maybe you're being called to kind of move away from your immediate environment. And I don't necessarily mean that literally, but it may be time to kind of reach a wider audience, right? Ninth house. The action that you are, or the assertion that you're being kind of challenged with has to do with your 12th house, because Mars is sitting in the 12th for you. So your spiritual life, self-sabotaging behaviors. This can have to do with addictions. It can have to do with how we spend time in solitude and rest and reflection. It has to do with what goes on behind closed doors. And this includes like facilities like rehab facilities, hospitals, spiritual retreat centers, youth detention centers, hospices, these kinds of things, right? Prisons. So this can have to do with, like I said, being called to kind of expand your horizons, move out of that immediate environment. Maybe sharing your philosophy and beliefs on a wider scale, and that has an impact of improving your well-being, right? Your spiritual well-being specifically. Maybe this can be like about it's time to check into some kind of like a rehab facility to deal with your self-sabotaging behaviors, or you're being called to take some kind of a spiritual retreat. So you're going to go on a spiritual retreat, and maybe travel a long distance to do that even. This can be you being called to become some kind of a spiritual teacher or student on some level, right? Take some kind of course of study, that kind of thing. So those are some possibilities for you, Scorpio. And we're going to move on now to Sagittarius, right? Keeping in mind, again, this can play out on so many different levels, but you get an idea when you understand the houses that it's happening in. So Sagittarius, you've got Mars in your 11th house, Mars and Libra in the 11th. And then it's squaring the nodes, right? The South Node in the 2nd house, South Node in Capricorn, and the North Node in Cancer in your 8th house. So the choice you're being challenged with has something to do with 2nd house, your personal resources, right? Your self-worth, your values, and your material possessions, your how you use your skills and talents to support yourself, right? Oftentimes financially. So personal resources, and versus those 8th house things, which have to do with our intimate connections, our vulnerability, other people's resources, time, money, energy. The things that we kind of keep under wraps, buried in our psyche kind of thing, are like occult knowledge, which just it means like hidden knowledge. And the action you need to take, right? You're being called to take, or the assertion, has something to do with the 11th house, hopes and dreams for the future, groups and associations, friendship groups, networks, people that are walking the same path as you in this life, right? So how can this look in real life? It can be perhaps North Node in the 8th house, suggesting it's time for you to take a risk, maybe, and be more vulnerable with people, right? To ask for support, maybe to dig a little deeper to understand where your potential, maybe you've got some issues around self-worth and where these stem from, where these are coming from. Do some psychological healing around that. Maybe it's time to get alone, 8th house, to help you reach your hopes and dreams, right? 11th house. Maybe being more vulnerable, 8th house, in a group setting, Mars in the 11th. So becoming part of like a support group, maybe. Or transforming, 8th house, in some way, your relationship to friendship groups, networks, clubs, associations, which is 11th house, right? So hopefully that gives you some idea of what's happening for you in relation to this Mars squaring the nodes and how that can potentially look and play out for you, Sagittarius. We're going to move on to Capricorn now, where we have Mars and Libra in the 10th house squaring the South Node in the 1st house, South Node in your sign in Capricorn, and the North Node in Cancer in the 7th house for you. So the choice, right, the nodal axis, has something to do with the self, 1st house, Capricorn, South Node, your physical health, your physical vitality, how you are perceived in the world, how you present yourself in the world, your trajectory through this life, and North Node in Cancer in the 7th, the other, your close personal relationships, one-to-one connections with people, whether that be, significant other, close friendships, business associates, this kind of thing. The action or the assertion for you revolves around the 10th house, which is where Mars is. Your career, your worldly ambitions, the legacy you wish to leave, your public life, your reputation and notoriety, your relationship to authority and perhaps the father or father figures in your life, right? Relationship to your own authority. And the North Node in the 7th, right? North Node, what we are optimally moving towards, suggests that maybe close partnerships or close relationships are the direction to embrace. So what could this look like in real life? Maybe a new business partner, right? Maybe partnering up with somebody that somehow, like, you're doing that through your career, through in a public way, and somehow. Or this could be you making some kind of decision about a significant other. So maybe, I don't know, maybe like you will decide to kind of take that relationship to the next level and maybe get, engaged or married. And this is a public kind of display, right? 10th house. So, that's the action that you're taking. So those are just some examples. There's many other ways this could play out, but that should give you some idea of what's going on for you and what houses this is impacting here. So that's for you, Capricorn. Moving on to Aquarius now. We've got Mars in the 9th house and the South Node in your 12th house, South Node in Capricorn, North Node in Cancer in your 6th house, right? So Mars squaring the nodal axis. The choice for you, Aquarius, has to do with on the South Node, in the 12th, perhaps the ways in which you sabotage yourself. It could have to do with how you spend time in solitude, your connection to a spiritual power, higher power, something involving, a spiritual retreat, or like it could have to do with a hospital, a prison, a rehab facility, this kind of, those kinds of institutions that are kind of like closed off from society in some way. And then on the North Node side is your daily routine, your health and wellness, issues involving health and wellness, how you are in service, right? And then the action or assertion, that fulcrum point is your ninth house, right? That's where Mars is sitting. So this has to do with higher learning, teaching and learning, perhaps travel, usually of a longer distance variety, expanding your philosophies, expanding your horizons in some way, your belief system, um, teaching, learning, seeking greater meaning, right? And so, what could this look like in real life? This could have to do with you making a decision to take some kind of training, spiritual, that has a spiritual flavor to it. Yoga teacher training. Okay, let's just use that as an example. And that impacts, right, your daily routine, sixth house. So that's like a choice you're making on the day to day, right? And it involves health and wellness, sixth house. Or, and a very, like, let's take it in a different direction. This could have to do with getting control, taking action to get control of your wellness in some way. So maybe checking into a rehab facility somewhere. That is helping you get control of your health issues, right? And improve your daily routines and this kind of thing. This just like really kind of what kind of came up for me as examples when I was considering the houses and stuff. So again, this can play out in many different ways, but that gives you some idea, Aquarius, as to this energy and how it's how it's playing out for you. So moving on to Pisces now, where we've got Mars in your 8th house, Pisces, and it's squaring the South Node in Capricorn in your 11th house and the North Node in Cancer in your 5th house. So Pisces, for you, the choice, what lies in the balance kind of thing, North Node, South Node, has to do with South Node, involves your hopes and dreams for the future, your friendship groups and clubs and associations and networks and the people that are kind of, on the same trajectory as you. And then South Node or North Node in the 5th, your self-expression, your creative self-expression. Your children that you work with or are associated with, your inner child. What sparks joy for you, how you have fun in life, right? Hobbies, interests, these kinds of things. Romance even. So that's all 5th house. And the action or assertion that you're being challenged to take is centered around that 8th house, Mars in the 8th. So this has to do with your intimate connections, where you're vulnerable, other people's resources, money, time, energy, kind of like things that are buried in the psyche and psychological healing and the occult, right? Hidden knowledge. So some action centered around those life themes. And the North Node in the 5th suggesting, that's kind of where you want to ultimately head. So maybe this is about breaking free from a group, 11th house, right? South Node in the 11th, to kind of do your own thing, right? And in order to do that, you need to be more vulnerable, Mars in the 8th house. Or maybe another example could be you taking action to get a loan, 8th house, to start your own business, 5th house, North Node in the 5th house, right? And that business is your creative self-expression, or that business might have something to do with children, this kind of thing, or a hobby that you right now is just a hobby and you want to turn it into a business, for example. So that's for you, Pisces. I think that gives you enough to go on. And I'm going to move on to Aries now, where Aries, you have Mars and Libra in the 7th house for you, squaring the nodes, South Node in the 10th, right? Capricorn, and North Node in Cancer in the 4th house for you. So, Aries, the choice for you, right? That's the nodal axis. has to do with South Node in the 10th, your career, your worldly ambitions, your public reputation, your relationship to authority and father figures and your own authority, the legacy you wish to leave. This is 10th house versus the 4th house, North Node in Cancer, home, family, place of living, your private life, your roots, mother figures, that nurturing mother energy, your emotional security, your foundations. And the action, the fulcrum point for you, the action or assertion that you're being challenged to take revolves around your one-to-one relationships, close personal relationships. That can be relationships with a significant other, marriage partner or the like. It can have to do with close personal friends or family members, business partners, this kind of thing. And so the North Node, right, what we're wanting to move towards in the 4th, suggesting that, taking some action regarding your one-to-one relationships in the direction of ancestral healing, establishing a home with someone who is close to you, right? Maybe like, again, a significant other, or a close family member or friend. Maybe starting a home business with a partner. This is, all ways that this could potentially play out for you. And so some choices and actions around those things are being, you're being challenged with that at this time, Aries. So we're going to move on to Taurus now, where we have Mars sitting in your 6th house, right? That's where Libra is for you, Taurus. And this is squaring the nodal axis. So the South Node in Capricorn in the 9th house and the North Node in Cancer in your 3rd house, right? So the choice, North Node, South Node, has to do with South Node in the 9th, higher learning, teaching, getting your message out to a wider audience, your philosophy and your belief system. Sometimes ninth house speaks to kind of religious dogma even. Travel, foreign cultures, expanding your horizons, this kind of thing. Versus North Node in the 3rd, your immediate environment, your closer community, the people that are in closer proximity to you, oftentimes peers, cousins, neighbors, siblings. Communications, like the day-to-day communications, right? Thoughts, ideas, messages exchanged back and forth. And the assertion or the action for you centers around, right, that fulcrum point, Mars and Libra in the 6th, your daily routines, things that have to do with health and wellness, how you are of service to others. So how can this, what does this look like in real life, right? Some examples might be, the focus for you, what you are being drawn towards, North Node in the 3rd, has to do more with like your local environment and community, your peers. Again, that's just, peers, cousins, siblings, potentially. So say running a local health and wellness group, right? 6th house, health and wellness. 3rd house, North Node in the 3rd, local community. It could have to do with being of service, 6th house, to those in your local community. Volunteering, 6th house, at an elementary school, 3rd house. Making a change in your daily routine, right? 6th house, that involves your immediate environment, 3rd house, in some way. So hopefully these give you some ideas. When I say these things, hopefully it sparks your own personal, whatever's going on in your own personal sphere, and you'll kind of have an idea of what this speaks to for you, Taurus. But we're going to move on to Gemini now, where we've got lots more to go here, but Gemini, Mars in the 5th, and squaring the nodes, South Node in the 8th, and North Node in Cancer in the 2nd for you, Gemini. So The choice for you, Gemini, has to do with, on the one hand, South Node in your 8th house. So the house of vulnerability and intimacy and other people's resources, loans, taxes, debt, insurance, scholarships, wills, inheritance, all of this. And, or even money you make from, that has to do with your spouse in some way or something along those lines. It also has to do with hidden psychological issues, hidden knowledge, hidden secrets, this kind of thing, right? Versus the South or North Node in the 2nd house, your personal resources, time, money, energy. Has to do with your self-worth, has to do with your material possessions and your values, right? So the action that you are being called to take and challenged with, or the assertion, Gemini, centers around your 5th house of children, of your creative self-expression, right? Individual creativity, what sparks joy for you, your hobbies, interests, your inner child, this kind of thing. And so the North Node in the 2nd suggesting that, it's optimal to move in that direction, right? Of kind of self-sufficiency in a sense, or valuing your worth, or, moving in the direction of your core values. This can have to do with you kind of, I don't know, maybe deciding to turn a hobby into a business. Or maybe there's a child, 5th house, leaving the nest to become more self-sufficient, 2nd house. Or it could be you choosing to raise your prices, right? 2nd house, valuing yourself more for your artwork or some other creative offering, 5th house. Could have to do with a child becoming more self-sufficient even. So these are just some things to consider for you, Gemini. And we will move on to Cancer now, where we've got Mars in the 4th house, squaring the South Node in your 7th house and the North Node in your 1st house. So the choice for you, Cancer, has to do with, on the one hand, your close personal one-to-one relationships. And on the other hand, your self, your physical vitality and physical health, how you present yourself to the world, your trajectory in this life. So, and the action or assertion for you centers around your home, your family, your place of living, real estate, your emotional security, this kind of thing. So the North Node in the 1st suggesting a focus on independence, on the self. Maybe, for example, you're currently in business with someone and it's time to go it alone. Maybe your business has something to do with real estate or interior design or building homes or something like that, right? And so a decision needs to be made around this. And it's suggesting, that independence in some way is the way to go here. Maybe you're in a position where there's a close personal relationship ending, and so the living arrangements are going to be changing, like a house needs to be sold or something like that, right? Or maybe you're just doing some home improvements and projects and you're kind of, doing those on your own. That's possible as well. But that's the areas that this is speaking to for you, Cancer. So hopefully that gives you enough to go on. And we're going to move on to Leo now, where we have Mars and Libra in the 3rd, squaring the South Node in your 6th and the North Node in your 12th house. So for you, Leo, the choice has to do with, on the one hand, your physical health and wellness, 6th house, your daily routine and how you are of service, 6th house, and your mental, spiritual health, 12th house, potentially self-sabotaging behaviors, 12th house, places of confinement, right? Or behind closed doors, where we've got things like prisons, spiritual retreat centers, rehab facilities, hospices, these kinds of things. How you spend time in solitude and rest is also the 12th house. And the action or assertion has to do with the third house of communications, siblings, peers, cousins, immediate environment, right? So the North Node in the 12th for you is suggesting that sort of like the spiritual aspect is the key here. This is the direction, right, that you want to move towards. So perhaps in real life, this is like a lot of communication, third house, happening regarding health issues, 12th, 6th house. Or maybe you connecting to a spiritual community, right? So, and there's more communications, and that's in your immediate environment, third house. So that's some potential, how this could play out for you, Leo. And we're going to move on to last but not least here, where we've got Virgo. With Mars in your second house, Virgo, and then squaring the South Node in your 5th house and the North Node in your 11th house. So for you, Virgo, the choice has to do, on the one hand, with children, your individual creative self-expression, what sparks joy for you. And then on the other hand, North Node in the 11th, groups, friendships, associations, networks, your hopes and dreams for the future. And the action or assertion for you, the fulcrum point, Virgo, is your personal resources, your self-worth, your values, your time, money, energy kind of thing. And so in real life for you, Virgo, this could be like you're working on some collaboration when you normally go it alone, right? 11th house. Maybe you're looking at turning your creative self-expression, 5th house, into something that will reach a wider audience, 11th house. Maybe it's time to use, to raise your prices, 2nd house, right? Value yourself more. Or utilize your personal resources for the greater good, 11th house, or to connect with a group that shares your values, 11th house. So hopefully that makes sense for you, Virgo, and for everyone. And that's all 12 signs. Let me know if this resonated with you. I'm curious to know if